Hi everybody, it's Steven GetMoneyMyrick here, and you are watching Friday Night Recap, the show where we discuss what's going on in the world of Magic the Gathering this week. This week we had some pretty cool stuff happen. Throne of Eldraine got released and we had the pre-release, and so I'm going to be discussing this week how my pre-release went and what my results were and what my deck looked like. This is our very first episode, so if you're tuning in, thank you very much. I'm hoping to be able to make one of these episodes once a week and discuss a lot of what's going on in Magic and the things that have been happening and some of my results that I've had. So thanks for tuning in. Before we get into the pre-release, I want to start by opening a pack of Magic cards. So I have a pack from the newest set, Throne of Eldraine. We will be opening one of these each week, discussing some of the limited options in it, as well as looking at our rares. So our first common is Lonesome Unicorn, which is a perfectly fine card in white. Then we have Witching Well, works well in blue-white artifacts. Lash of Thorns, which is a instant, give a creature +2/+1 and Death Touch until end of turn. Not very excited about that card. Barrel Witches is a card I got to play in my pre-release deck. I'll be talking more about that. It seems like it's pretty good in the Knights deck. Corridor Monitor, common, not very exciting. Would go in the blue-white artifact deck, but you'd have to have some crazy artifact synergies to make it worth it. Garenbrig Paladin. This is basically a 4/4 for 5. If you pay 3 green mana, you can get a 5/5. Dwarven Mine, which is the red common land. I would play this in any red deck that I was playing in Limited. Weapon Rack, we're not going to talk too much about. Brimstone Trebuchet, good in the Knights deck. Skullknocker Ogre is our first uncommon. Whenever Skullknocker or Ogre deals damage to an opponent, that player discards a card at random. If the player does, they draw a card. So I wouldn't really ever play that. Now, Mirrorleaf Pixie is our next uncommon. This is a great card in the blue-green deck. Definitely recommend playing it. It's a 2-mana 2/2 flyer that can tap for green or blue. So that's just awesome. Okay, well I just saw a rare, but we'll do our last uncommon. Grumgully the Generous. Each other non-human creature you control gets a +1/+1 counter when it enters the battlefield. It's a 3-mana 3/3, very strong in the non-human deck. So our rare is Murderous Rider. Awesome. Very happy about that. I actually opened another Murderous Rider in my pack, so now I've got 2. So very excited about the Murderous Rider. And we actually got a foil in here too, a foil uncommon, Thunder Snapper, which I'm also going to be talking about this card surprisingly. And our food token. So pretty solid pack. Happy about the Murderous Rider. And with that, we're going to be diving into how the pre-release went this week. So I got to play in an 8-man pre-release, which was nice to have that small of an environment. And I pulled some pretty busted cards, so we're going to go take a look at those right now. Was the Magic Mirror. This card is very cool. I've already sold mine, it's foil, but it is not playable in Limited. The inability to turn off that draw effect, it can be real brutal and it can just kill you by milling yourself. That's assuming you ever find the ability to cast it. So did not end up playing that. What I did end up playing instead was this list right here. So move this over a little bit. So this is the packs that I opened and the cards that I opened. And I will have a link in the video if you want to look through this deck and see what you may have come up with. But honestly, it was pretty clear from the beginning I should be playing red-black. I did open a Once Upon a Time, which was nice. So definitely got my money. If you can tell, the paper right now was $68. I paid $25 to enter the event. Got that promo Magic Mirror. It's not full art like this version is here. But this was all the cards I opened, and as I mentioned, it was pretty straightforward from the beginning. I should be doing black-red. The reasons for that are pretty obvious. I had a Murderous Rider that I opened, which is an extremely, extremely powerful card. And I also opened the most powerful card, Clackbridge Troll. So that's a 5-mana 8/8 with Trample and Haste. When it enters the battlefield, target opponent creates 3/0/1 white goat creatures, right? So it's an 8/8 trample haste for 5, which is insane. But if they, at the beginning of combat, they can sacrifice a creature, but to tap down my troll. But if they do that, I get to gain 3 life and draw a card. So Yeah, you can take him out of combat, but I'm drawing cards anytime you do. Extremely, extremely powerful card. And on top of all that, I got Sundering Stroke, which is a 7-mana sorcery that can deal 7 damage divided up among at least 3 permanents, or 3 targets. And there's an Adamant there if you're a mono red, which we were not. That's extremely powerful. So, opening those rares, getting a red cat melee, getting a Circara the Bold, it was pretty obvious I was going to be playing black-red. And I actually got pretty nuts as far as the amount of knights I ordered. I got an Order of Midnight. I got a Blacklance Paragon, which is a creature I hadn't seen, but it's a 3/1 flash human knight, and when it enters the battlefield, target knight gains Death Touch and Lifelink. Okay, I also opened an Elite Headhunter. We got a ton of knights, and then the only creatures we're playing that really aren't knights are Barrow Witches, which can get knights back, and also Brimstone Trebuchet, which can untap whenever a knight enters the battlefield. So for being a sealed deck, I felt very, very confident, very happy with this. I got 2 Joust, which is a good removal spell we'll talk about more in a second, and a Slaying Fire, and a Red Cat Melee. So what you'll notice, though, is I do not have the 1 mana red instant deal 3. I don't have any copies of that. I believe it's Scorching Dragonfire. And I don't have any Baked into Pies either. But lots of knights. We had the ability, I thought about putting in some Foreboding Fruit. This card actually has the ability to ping them for 2 if I have to, but also gets me some draw spells. But I went away from any food synergies, really. I just went straight for as many knights as I could get. I wanted as many triggers as I could get with Barrow Witches being able to come back. And I wanted some sweet interactions there. So that's the deck we rocked. And I was feeling pretty good going into game 1. So now we're going to talk about game 1. Okay, so as I mentioned, it was a 8-man pool, which means it was only going to be 3 rounds. So I knew I wanted to go 3-0. And so I'm going to break through my first opponent. First opponent, they were playing a blue-black control deck. Game 1, I took pretty easily. They really only cast a Memory Theft. It was basically the only spell I saw of them in the first game, and I beat them down pretty heavily. I drew a Clackbridge Troll in that game, and that card is just a beater. Game 2, they showed me a lot more of their deck. They had a Piper on turn 2. This is the card that can create some rats and get out of control. And I was able to get their life total low, but they were eventually able to stabilize and turn the game around. And I saw a lot more counter spells out of them, and I was a lot more impressed with their deck in game 2. And then game 3, at this point we were running pretty low on time. He was a slower player, and that's fine. It's the pre-release. People don't know all the cards, but we had gotten low on time. I was in a position where I was going to win the game because I had the Trebuchet, and the Trebuchet did a ton of work for me in game 1, specifically match 1. Untapping and just pinging, he probably got in 6 points of damage. And so it was getting to a state where I was going to win the game eventually, but the clock ran out and went to turns, and it got to turn 5. So for people that haven't played in competitive events before, turn 5 is the last chance after time. You get 5 more turns. Like I get 1 turn, he gets another turn, that's 2. So it's turn 5, he's at 3 health, and actually ripped a Slaying Fire off of the top of my deck, and he's at 3 life, and I checked to make sure he's all tapped out, and it's like, okay, you're all tapped out, because he's playing blue-black. He played and I just hit him in the face with it, and did 3. I was definitely panicking, because he had played a lot of counter spells. He had played, I think it's Drowning Lock. It's the black-blue that you can counter spell for however many creature cards you have in your graveyard. And I was pretty surprised by how good that card was without really trying. He was able to do a lot with that card. But one match won, went to 3 games, went to time, but ripping that Slaying Fire off the top was just the cream of the crop, because he was at 3 life, and it was one of only 2 outs I had. So I went from feeling pretty good about my deck to man, this deck I play against wasn't even that great, and I barely squeezed it out. And that kind of carried on into match 2. I was playing a black-green opponent. I'm going to start by saying they got very lucky, because they were playing the Simic 4-drop, the Thunderous Snapper. Okay, so it's green and blue, and he's playing blue-black, and on turn 5 he's able to cast this spell, and get a 4/4 that when he does something 5 or greater, he draws a card. And he followed that up with a Feasting Troll King. So, I mean, Feasting Troll King was just brutal to deal with, and it's once you take care of it once, it can come right back. So we definitely lost game 1. Game 2, I kept a really aggressive hand. It had an Order of Midnight in it, and it had a Rimrock Knight, and I was able to just beat him down with Joust. Order of Midnight with Joust is one really powerful combination of cards. You're able to kill their 2/2s because you can make your Order of Midnight a 4/3, right? Kill their 2/2s and then swing for 4 damage flying. And so between him and the Rimrock Knight, I was hitting for 7 points of damage a turn, on turn 3 and 4 and 5. So I was just playing a lot of Joust. I had a Red Cat melee, which I was just even sacking lands just to get blockers out of the way to make sure I could keep hitting. So that game actually ended pretty quickly. So it's now 1-1 in our second match. In the match 3, or game 3 of match 2, I honestly just don't know what happened. I must have kept a slow hand. I should have taken more notes about exactly how I lost. I know he had 2 Malevolent Nobles at one point on the board. So they're both 2/2s, and he can pay 2 and sack something to give it a +1/+1 counter. And I had an Elite Headhunter, which is a 2/3, and it just would have felt awful to block anything there because he can just sack one of his permanents, make it a 3/3, and kill my Headhunter. And he just kept slowly hitting me for 2. He baked in a pie a few things, and honestly, I just lost before I really knew what happened. He definitely had some luck. He got a lot of adamant triggers. I think another card we got from him. Did we get it? Yeah. He got the Garenberg Paladin. It's a 5 mana with adamant, and he's casting on turn 5 with adamant for green. So, I mean, which is, I don't know, less than 50% chance of happening. There's a 40% chance. So it's not unheard of, but yeah, I was starting to feel pretty bad because I've got some pretty busted rares. Did not really draw Clackbridge Troll that game. Still, I've never drawn my Murderous Rider at all between match 1 and match 2. So that stunk. And then match 3, okay, so I'm 1-1. Match 3, I'm playing my opponent, and he's also playing black-green. And he goes turn 1, Adventure Lovestruck Beast. And I'm like, okay, he's starting with Lovestruck Beast out the door. And then he goes, turn 2, Adventure Lovestruck Beast, another one, right? Turn 3, he cast his 5/5 Lovestruck Beast. Turn 4, he cast his other Lovestruck Beast from Adventure. And so now it's turn 4, he's got 12 power on the board, and he's only used 2 cards. And it was just brutal. I was just laughing. And actually, I think I drew my Clackbridge Troll in that game. So I was feeling good, but he was able to just like Murderous Rider it. So he had like Lovestruck Beast, Murderous Rider, and it was just like lights out, game over, and I was just laughing the whole time. So he won game 1. Game 2 was extremely grindy, and I was luckily able to pull it out. I had one giant misplay, which is I had an Order of Midnight, which can return any creature from the graveyard, and I thought it was only knights. I was getting my cards confused. And so I had a Clackbridge Troll in the graveyard I could have returned. Instead, I brought back an Ogre Errant. So not the best play by me. Realized it very quickly afterwards, but the guy didn't seem too interested in letting me take the play back, which is fine. I mean, I make mistakes, but I'm happy I was able to bring it back out. And this is the first game I drew my Murderous Rider. I was able to kill one of his Lovestruck Beast. And we grinded it out, and yeah, I won game 2. So now I'm 1-1 in my matches, and I'm 1-1 in my games in match 3, and I'm really trying to at least go 2-1. And it didn't happen. Again, game 3 was pretty grindy. We were pretty short on time again. And this guy was another slower player, which is fine again. He had a lot of cards in his hand, so he had a lot of choices to make. But I don't really... This is the thing I'll tell you that was cool, okay? The cool thing about this game was I was able to use my Elite Headhunter with my Paragon Knight, which was a very cool interaction because Paragon Knight gives my Elite Headhunter Death Touch and Lifelink, and then I can pay 3, sacrifice a permanent to deal 2. Elite Headhunter deals 2 damage to target creature or planeswalker. So there was a sports day where I was able to pay, like I had 8 mana at this point. I was able to flash in Paragon Knight and sacrifice 2 things to kill 2 of his creatures because the Elite Headhunter has Death Touch, and I was also gaining life off of it. And so that was a cool interaction. Obviously, it's a rare and an uncommon interaction, so it won't come up too often. But because Elite Headhunter actually does the damage, it has Death Touch, I was able to take out a lot of his creatures doing that. But it got to a point where he had a pretty powerful board. He had a Garenbrig Paladin as well, the 5/5. He also had 2 Lovestruck Beast at another point. And I got him to a point where he was down to 3 life. It went to turns again, just like in match 1. And it got to turn 5, my turn, and he was at 3 life. And I had Circara the Bold in play. And so I essentially had my draw step, and I was going to ping him for 1, and I'd have another draw step. And I ping him with Circara, I get him down to 2, and then I draw the Smitten Swordmaster. It's the black knight that drains for the number of knights you have. And unfortunately, I only had the 1 knight Circara on the battlefield, so I was able to drain him and get him down to 1. So technically, he went down to 1 life, and then the game, legally went to a tie, but I just gave him the win because he was definitely going to win on the next turn. So I finished 1 and 2, which is like crazy because I had Murderous Rider, Clackbridge Troll, and Sundering Stroke, and was feeling very, very good about, my deck and all the knights. I can't believe how many knights I opened, but, some takeaways from that. I didn't have any Steel Claw Lances, right, which is the artifact for the Black-Red Knight deck. That's a very powerful card, and I think really makes that deck operate. I didn't have any Scorching Dragonfires. I didn't have any Baked into Pies. I just had a ton of knights, and I think my curve was probably a little too high. I most likely needed some more 2-drops in there to be as aggressive as I was trying to be. I didn't have the removal to be as controlly as I wanted to be, but I didn't have as many 2-drops to be as aggressive as I wanted to be. So, yeah, 1 and 2. I'm upset with my results. Going up against a bunch of Lovestruck Beasts, though, I was just laughing, and I had fun. I was happy we were able to get 8 people there for the pre-release. Opened some pretty powerful cards and had a great time. Okay, now that we've talked about the pre-release and how I found a way to go 1 and 2 somehow with Clackbridge Troll and Murderous Rider, I wanted to get to the final part of our show, which is closing time, where I talk about a few things that came up in the world of Magic this week. 2 things I want to talk about this week. One is the storybook version of Reaper of Night. This card I saw at the pre-release, and it's a comment. I cannot believe how freaking good this card looks. I was laughing about the idea of some of these promotional products Wizards is doing. I still think it's a little ridiculous to put so many pimp staples for standard cards, but this card is sick, and if they keep making amazing art like this, that's just very, very exciting. The other thing I wanted to talk about was the card Fires of Invention. This is a card that Mr. Metronome on the podcast Lords of Limited was pretty high on, and during his pre-release event that he streamed, he was able to cast a Feasting Troll King off of it. He was in a blue-red deck, but because of the way the card works, he was able to play a Feasting Troll King, and it was just brutally, amazing. But then Limited Resources talked about the card, and they gave it a straight F. So I'm pretty excited to see where this card ends up. It's a very exciting card, and I'm just kind of excited to see where that card ends up in the format, and also some pretty cool applications for, modern and maybe even standard. So that's just the few things I want to talk about during closing time. As I mentioned, this is my first episode. I appreciate everybody that stuck around and watched. Next week I will be going over my first draft, which I plan on doing next Friday night. If there's anything you'd like to see in the future, just let me know. And thanks for watching.